All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Lunchalytics 28. Today we have two speakers talking about economics and economic analytics. But before they get started, because we only have two speakers, we have a little more time. That means I get to just kill time a little bit with the mic. I love to do that. So first off, how many students are there here in the audience? Students? Hardly. Oh, it's final exams. Hardly any students will show up. How many creators of analytical results are there here? Like the doers of analytics? Raise your hands. And how many consumers of analytics? You eat this stuff and you use it for making decisions. All right, that's good. That's good. Excellent. Our topic today, here we are. Look at this wonderful thing. This is the Lunchalytics website. For those of you who haven't seen it, I had thought I better show you a few things because we worked so hard to build it. So first off, we have this great photo of us at Lunchalytics. There we are. And we show the upcoming events, and you can RSVP, and the past events. And if we clicked on, say, the fraud one, we can see who the speakers were, but we can also get the video right there. So you can watch it over and over again if you didn't quite catch how to commit fraud. Then we added a couple new things. I mean, you can sign up and say, hey, notify me when the free lunch is coming. But even better, check this out. Let's say you knew that there was a training program offered by Nate on how to do good visualizations. Then you could fill it in here and the type of course that it is with a short description and a link to it and submit it. And then we would post a link to it on here. So we would have a kind of a roster of the different training programs that are offered, whether they're through universities or just like one-day seminars or other things like that. So kind of an events thing. This will be, what do you call that? The newfangled word, curated. Curated. So you just can't put up, you know, dating sites or whatever. Local. So we just want local Edmonton area training. So don't go searching the web and like, oh yeah, like there's this online course in South America. Secondly, we created a job board. Very similar. If you are, this is not for job seekers to put in your name like, hey, I'm looking for a job. This is for people who are looking for employees. So if you're a company and you are looking to hire people, we can put it right here and it'll be listed here and it'll just have a link to your website or whatever it is where you've posted the details of your job posting. So it can become a bit of a hub for those of us interested in analytics and working in the field and finding employees in the field. And lastly, if you are a consultant or service provider, you are local talent, meaning that you have people here that know how to do the math or the visualization, we can also post that here as well. Trying to create a bit of a, what would you call it? A catalog of analytics providers in the local market. So those are three new things we've added to Lunchalytics. But of course, you're more excited about sponsoring or speaking at the events, you can also do it here. You can say, hey, I'd love to sponsor one on like the analytics of genetics or something like that, or if you want to speak. So go ahead, click around on Lunchalytics, re-watch these things over and over. We try and get our hit counter up into 4 digits. That's our goal there. But while we're on this note, are there any people here who are hiring right now? Anyone hiring for analytics positions? So we have one. Who will give me 2? We have anyone else? Anyone else? All right, Reese, why don't you tell us what you're interested in?
We're going to be hiring a corporate data analyst in the city of St. Albert. So the job posting will be coming out in the next week or 2. And it'll be someone with a quantitative background that'll be helping out with regressions, research, data cleansing, data mining, all that stuff to help fuel better evidence-based decision-making in local government.
Wonderful. Now, what Reese didn't tell you is that 80% of your job will be data cleaning, because that's what analytics is, we have learned. Not just his job, that's just in general. When you survey analysts who do analytics, 80% of their job is data wrangling. We all know that. Anyone else with a job? Anyone else? Anyone else? I think Dark Horse is always hiring for a data visualization expert, and we just can't find one. So if you know one, tell them to talk to us. Secondly, if you're looking for a job, raise your hand. You're looking for a job in the analytics field. So there's a few people in the back row. Maybe talk to Reese. He's a good guy. All right, I think I've killed enough time. Let us turn it over to Gareth. Gareth is going to talk about economic complexity, which is, let me tell you, this isn't like your mom's microeconomics. This is solid stuff, I have to admit. So take it away, Gareth.
Find it interesting. So my name is Gareth Higgins. I work with the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade for the government of Alberta. More specifically, I work for what's called the Economic Information and Analytics Unit. So our primary role is to provide economic information to the public through data-driven web applications. We've got a few of those. Other half of our business is supporting evidence-based decision-making in the government of Alberta. So we have done a few analytics projects, one with Dark Horse recently. This is another one of ours, economic complexity. I'll present kind of just a very general overview on what complexity is, and I'll dive into some Alberta-specific results from about Alberta model that we've built. So, should we have a clicker? So, concept of economic complexity, as I'm talking about here, comes out of Harvard and MIT. So there's an economist in Harvard, Ricardo Hausman, and MIT, Cesar Hidalgo, who developed economic complexity. Basically, it's just a way of looking at the industrial structure of an economy and of predicting future economic growth. So they argue that an economy can only grow as much as supported by the knowledge that's embedded in it. So the central premise is that productive knowledge is the driver of economic prosperity. So when we're using the term productive knowledge, they also use the term capabilities. What we're talking about is asset knowledge. So that's knowledge that people and economies sort of gain through doing, through experimentation and failure. So this kind of knowledge is very hard to develop. It takes a long time to develop. So through that, economies embed this knowledge in individuals, distribute it amongst its members, and then they put it to use through various organizations and markets. And as a result, you'll have larger complex economies like Germany or Japan, putting it across large swaths of people, or large organizations creating many highly complex products. So conversely, you'll have a lot of developing Asian and African economies that have narrow base of productive knowledge, sort of smaller webs of interaction. So they produce fewer and simpler products. So this accumulation of productive knowledge or capabilities in an economy is a bit of a chicken and egg problem. So on the one hand, you can't expect an economy to produce products that requires productive knowledge that it just does not have. On the other hand, economies have a hard time acquiring this productive knowledge when the industries that demand them just do not exist in the economy. So what important is in this is that it creates path dependencies in economies, as the accumulation of productive knowledge takes a long time to develop. So countries economize on this problem by kind of moving into spaces, that is products and industries that they kind of already know, that then just require adding modest amounts of productive knowledge. So that is going into industries and products that are close by in terms of the capabilities needed to produce them. So I'll get back to what I mean by close by. We'll just talk about two concepts in economic complexity, diversity and ubiquity. So diversity speaks to the diversity of products that are made in an economy. So Germany makes almost all products in the world, except for perhaps some natural resource products, and they produce a lot. Whereas a smaller economy like Alberta, let's say, does not produce a huge swath of products. Ubiquity relates to how many products or how many countries make a particular product. So you use these two variables to correct for one another, to find out how much productive knowledge goes into an economy, how much productive knowledge goes into a product. So you can use them to balance out. So if you look at any given product, if it's produced by only a few economies, you can say this is probably a complex product. It might be a resource, it might be oil, let's say, where only a few economies can produce, in which case then you take a look at what what other products the countries that produce that products also produce. If it's only few products, it's probably a natural resource and therefore probably a lower complexity product. Whereas if, let's say 5 countries produce a given product, and those are Germany, Japan, Korea, US, whatnot, it's probably a higher complexity product, meaning that those products require a lot of knowledge, require large organizations to produce. So going back, I guess, to the connections between products, we call them proximities and economic complexity. So this is one of the major outputs of economic complexity. It's called the product space. So it's just a network graph, a force-directed graph that they then sort of change around to make it actually readable, manually place a few things. So this is, I guess, the same across all economies. They make it the same across time periods as well, but it would technically change across, 20 years. So each node on there is a product, and it's connected based on its proximity. So whether a given product is also co-exported by a given country. So from there, they build up these connections and build up the product space. So if a particular node is closer to another node or connected through an edge, it is then inferred to have similar productive or require similar productive capabilities, similar knowledge to then produce it. So they're colored according to kind of industries. So these are based on what's called harmonized system, which is used in customs. So this is at the 4-digit level. This has 863 products. There's 400 that don't quite make the cut, so don't quite have the requisite threshold for proximities. They don't have knowledge that crosses over into making other products. So green right here is textiles. You can see there's a huge cluster on the right of textile products, and then some scattered throughout. It also includes stuff like wigs and plastics and whatnot. So if you can make, so one of these might be a woman's shirt. If you can make that, you can probably make some men's pants fairly easily. The knowledge crosses over. But you probably can't make that much else if you know how to do that. There's not many connections to other sort of industries. So contrast that. So this is machinery and electrical. So machinery's kind of in here, and then electrical parts, computer parts are in here. So the knowledge used to make those is more tightly connected in the product space, more in the center. If you then show all the industries, it connects to a lot of different industries. So products on the periphery, they're generally less complex. They don't connect to a lot of products. They're sort of primary agriculture or resource extraction industry. So a lot of these yellow dots in here and these light blue ones are primary agriculture. Up here, these are oil and gas and whatnot. So from there, each country has its own sort of representation of the product space. So this is just an example of South Korea from 1995 to 2014 and their sort of development through the product space. If a node is lit up, that means the country has what's called a revealed comparative advantage in that product. So it's just a ratio of that country's exports in that product over its total exports, over world exports in that product, over world exports. So basically they punch above their weight in that product. If it's above 1, they're said to have a revealed comparative advantage. So here on the left-hand side, this is South Korea in 1995. So they have lots of textile products and a smattering of other stuff, as well as a huge presence in the electronic space. And then if you move to 2014, they invested heavily in a lot of innovation sectors and whatnot. You can see they went out of textiles for sure, kind of electronics, but they moved far more into, so that a lot of these are automotive products. And top left-hand side, those are rubbers, plastics, chemical products and whatnot. So their GDP per capita in the past 20 years has doubled. And their rank, so that's what's called the economic complexity index rank, just a way to kind of formalize how much productive knowledge, formalize and rank how much productive knowledge is in an economy. So they went from the 20th most complex economy in the world to the 4th most complex economy in the world. And so that's built up of basically the products that they actually produce. So these nodes that are lit up. So we can do the same for Alberta. So there's a few, I guess, caveats with this. Number one is because they use export data, there's not great export data or very good disaggregated export data for services. So kind of have to just ignore that services exist at this moment. There are a few methodologies, I guess, that have been I've seen in the last year or so for trying to estimate services more accurately, but I guess you can kind of say products or services follow products. So if you develop a product, you'll probably develop the services around it that are required to support it. So this is just a tree map of Alberta's exports in 1995. Second big caveat, this is Alberta. So we only have great export data internationally. Our interprovincial export data is lagged, like disaggregated data is lagged. So the most recent we have now at a sort of refined level is 2013 through the supply use tables. We got StatCan in November released the detailed level supply use tables. We're kind of trying to work out how we can make some concordances between those codes and harmonized system codes. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. Once we do, we'll be able to have a more accurate representation of Alberta's product space. So until then, you can see about half and half is, well, half is gas and oil and a few other in the mining sector, and then the other half is various other sectors. So here's what Alberta's product space looks like. So fairly sparse. We have, these are agricultural products down here. So these are sort of wood and fiberboard and whatnot. Over here, telephones, whatnot from, I guess, I'm not sure if it's Klein era policies, but we don't have those anymore. So up here, this is oil and ammonia and some gases and whatnot. This is refined petroleum. So we can take Alberta's 2014 exports and apply it, and it doesn't look that different. So we don't export telephones anymore. What is, I guess, most different about that, this one is these products in here. So these are sort of heavy machinery. These are developed solely because of our exploitation of the oil sands. So this product up here, unfortunately, you cannot differentiate in world export data what's been developed through oil sands or what's been developed just through normal kind of crude. So if this were an Alberta-specific product space, you'll probably see some connections between refined petroleum, given the small amount of refining or upgrading that we do. And you probably see some more connections between some of these heavy machinery and oil. So from there, we can move into other spaces. So this is, I've done this for executives, so it's highly simplified, risk and reward. So on the y-axis, it's called the product complexity index, or you can use another measure called the opportunity gain. Basically, it is sort of reward products that are higher up on that space will reward Alberta in terms of complexity. So if they make those products, our economy will be more complex. Again, we want our economy to be perhaps more complex because it is a driver of economic growth. The more things we know, the more things we'll be able to produce, and the more other things we'll be able to produce. So this sort of the x-axis then is what we term risk. So that's another measure, distance. It uses the proximity values. So products that are on the right-hand side are harder to develop than products on the left-hand side. So we've kind of grouped them right now according to Porterian clusters. So Porter uses clusters. They actually use location quotients, the exact same calculation as the revealed comparative advantage. They call location quotient, but they just use employment. Basically, so they're shaded according to their revealed comparative advantage. So darker, we have more of an comparative advantage in there compared to lighter. So it's kind of a quadrant system. So these are products for which we actually do a fair amount. So oil and gas, obviously we do. They're sized according to our exports. Livestock processing, animal production, crop production, wood products. So they're doing, these are just the averages of all the products in there. So perhaps going into these industries, we would be able to do fairly easily, probably would not increase, we're talking about our long-term economic competitiveness, our long-term economic growth, if we were to go into those industries. So products in the bottom right, jewelry, furniture, textile manufacturing, leather and related products, apparel. We don't really do any of that here in Alberta right now. So unless we were to invest significantly in these industries, we probably would have a hard time developing them. And it looks like we might actually not want to. They're not going to sort of produce high-paying jobs. They're not going to have us competing with more complex economies, with larger economies like Germany and Japan and whatnot. So they'll have us competing with low-cost jurisdictions like Taiwan, or not Taiwan, but like China or Malaysia or whatnot. So on the top hand side, these are, I guess, sort of our top left would be moving into less or more complex products, but more easily. So paper, packaging, downstream chemicals, plastics, biopharmaceuticals, say, aerospace vehicles and defense. So for Alberta, that probably would be drones. On the top right-hand side, these would probably require more significant investments to develop those industries. So IT, analytics, lighting, and electrical equipment, and whatnot. So this is just a graph of Alberta's economic complexity index. So the y-axis is our rank in the world, down to 125 or whatever, over time. So on the left, 1995, I think we're about 26th most complex economy back in 1995, probably a bit higher given, again, our underrepresentation for interprovincial exports. But you can see that we are really not, we're actually lower right now. It's kind of paradoxical to think about when our crude oil exports go down, our complexity goes up because then more products will have a revealed comparative advantage of one. So we'll actually be, it'll seem like we're more complex. So that just means, I guess, that our reliance on sort of extractive industries and whatnot goes down because we're exporting less. And then we can get a more accurate picture of where our sort of longer term future economic growth might be, kind of excluding the oil sands, excluding oil development or natural resource development. So we've developed this Alberta model. We're iterating on it. We're right now trying to go to a more disaggregated level. So then we'll be able to roll it up much easier. There's also additional measures that have been developed, fitness measures and whatnot based off of it, trying to add in services. So it's a bit of an iterative process. And it feeds into some of the economic development activities that go on in our ministry. So, any questions?
I thought that was really interesting, and maybe I can see a few minutes later, but all of that data will be open and public data?
It is, kind of. So they use UN Comtrade data, but then another organization called CEPI sort of cleans the data, looks at which reporter is reliable or not, and then they publish it. So I think you have to have an institutional license kind of to access it, but it is based up in just Comtrade, UN Comtrade data. So it's all open and free. Yeah. So the methodology, we just basically plunked in Alberta as a country and followed the methodology in what's called the Atlas of Economic Complexity. So that was their initial website. They have 3 websites, the Observatory and the Globe of Economic Complexity. And they write papers. And so Hidalgo and Houseman sort of proselytized this idea, have been doing so for the past decade or so. Yep.
How do you define that distance between the products?
Sorry, the distance measure on here. Yeah. So formally, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you right now. The proximity measures. So I think it's just the probability, the conditional probability that a country will export product A if it also exports product B. And then so they sum all those up across all countries. So you can, if you're interested in sort of the formal definitions, again, you can go to the Atlas of Economic Complexity site and go into all that.
So playing devil's advocate a little bit, can't help it.
No worries.
I've seen some of this before in terms of import substitution, human capital, and most importantly, the question I have is, do you actually have any evidence that complexity drives prosperity?
So the evidence so we haven't actually tried to verify their result or their regressions and whatnot. So there has been criticisms about how they approach it, right? So basically they take a look at other indicators that try to project economic growth, like strength of institutions or educational attainment. And so they regress against a bunch of values. So they argue that for a non-resource economy, it provides predictive value. I think their R-squared is 75. Again, it's just them regressing against a bunch of different variables. So you can criticize that approach. It hasn't really been around long enough to actually verify. Yes, they've been fairly accurate. They have projections. So on their site, they have projections out to 2024. And right now they have India is like the #1 growing economy in the next 10 years, 10 or so years.
Do you understand why I was asking? I mean, basically it looked like you were suggesting we should compete with Germany and Japan in every sector. And that sounds like a strategy that has been tried before and not well.
So no, this not suggesting that for sure. We're using this kind of as one tool among many for analysis. And yes, this might look, so if we go to this one, you're saying it might look like we should actually compete everywhere, right?
Well, no, from that, I would conclude you should go to the left and up.
Yeah, so this is like kind of the most attractive sector based on this. Again, there might be other reasons for you to develop certain industries that sort of economic complexity does not necessarily touch on political reasons and whatnot as well. But so this has not been used as, you know, a signpost of where exactly the Alberta economy should go. Yeah.
I think it's interesting stuff. Thanks for the talk. A couple of questions. One is, I'm interested in what, I don't know if you can talk about this, but what kind of response you get to the analysis and how you, how you express it when, for the first kind of half of the first 3 quarters of it, talking that complexity is good and that's a driver of future growth, and then at the very end you say that it looks like it's lopping off the resource sector is a good idea and increases your economic complexity. So it seems like you might lose your audience at that point.
Yeah, so then you can add in, like you can get obviously you can get economic growth through resource sectors, and tons of economies do. So for the Alberta government, at least right now, they're looking to sort of more actively diversify the economy. So it's never been, let's ignore the resource sector or not put any resources into it. We have a whole ministry, the Ministry of Energy, devoted to it. A lot of these things are actually also sort of spitting off of the resource sector. Products and whatnot, services that we provide, products that we'd make that we never would have had were it not for us developing, again, the oil sands. So yeah, it's not exactly, that's not what we're proposing here. Yeah.
You said that when the resource sector like drops off, that's where our complexity looks like it's going up, but really that's because it kind of balances out a little bit more when the resources go down, right?
Yeah.
So have you done that same chart where you've removed the resource sector completely from all angles to see if our complexity has gone up despite that?
Have not. So my guess is, yeah, if we just like lopped off the resource sector entirely, it would have, my guess is it probably would have gone up a bit, but not much. The sides of the right-hand side here and the sides of the right-hand side here, I mean, yeah. So we would, it is also, we don't export anything, any oil and whatnot to other provinces. If we did add in all of the stuff that we do export to other provinces, our complexity would definitely be higher. So we might actually, maybe not, but like rival Canada. Right now we're below the Canadian average, but yeah.
My question was going to be, how do we compare to Canada or other provinces? Like, are we unique or are we very similar to the rest of Canada?
So we're not similar enough to Canada that we could actually use what's on the Canadian Atlas. They have huge, Ontario has a huge automotive sector. So I guess, industrial makeup of the other provinces, we haven't yet produced these results for other provinces. Other provinces haven't produced these results yet either. Someone in the UFT is looking to put out a paper in the fall that uses this methodology and applies it to all provinces, but it hasn't been released yet, and I haven't had the inclination to do it for other provinces yet.
On the slide with the risk and reward, how do you quantify things like risk for things like performing arts or other industries of that?
Yeah, so I kind of hope that the performing arts wouldn't show up. So usually what happens there, so these are Porterian clusters. They're cluster definitions. So usually if it's performing arts, it's like literally one product or 2 products, a lot of services products that would actually fall under there. So I don't know what's actually under performing arts, but you'll get weird stuff like sort of printing press type stuff that would fall under what seems to be a service. So I would have to look actually what's under performing arts. My guess is it's one product that's probably better classified as another one. So we take these classification concordances from Statistics Canada, and then they're at the Canadian level, and then we manually go through and change them, given our sort of industrial structure.
So risk isn't like cost to develop this industry, is that the risk?
Yeah, so I guess in this term, risk could be thought of as I guess, the time and the capital it might take to develop these industries. So we might want to invest sort of longer time horizons, lots of capital, look at changing our labor programs. Our head houseman would probably argue that you should not train, you should actually bring people in who already know and to do this stuff, bring them from other economies to actually start getting work, which is kind of what Ireland has done in their sort of higher tech industries. So it would be, do we want to sort of change our policies and programs to that degree for a particular industry?
All right, thanks very much. It was good to see. I'm sure this is analytics, the IT analytical industry. I'm pretty sure that one is hard to get into, but that's us here, right? That was us. So our next talk is actually it's a bit of a treat. Is our next speaker here? Yeah, right here. Oh, there he is. Okay. So we have Owen. Is it Jung? Yep. Owen Jung is going to be talking about estimating the impacts of economic activities using publicly available economic multipliers. But what makes this really special is you can only view it if you're here in person, because he doesn't want to speak on behalf of the government. He's going to tell us a bunch of secret stuff that he can't tell other people. So sadly, to those of you who are online, go back and rewatch the hockey one in light of your others lost last night. But we'll bid you farewell, and thanks for joining us. So